These little ones are so cute, aren't they? Yes, they are. Well, greetings, friends. Right here, I have Pekin ducklings. Yes, these little yellow cotton ball looking things here are so cute. I don't know if there is such thing as yellow cotton balls, but they look like it to me. These little yellow puff balls. Man. And I got these ducklings here from Murray McMurray Hatchery, which I absolutely love, by the way. We've gotten a number of ducklings from them in the past, as well as chicks as well. And we've had a lot of great experiences from all the birds that we get from that hatchery. So if you're looking for a hatchery to get some poultry or waterfowl, make sure you check out Murray McMurray. I'll leave their link in the show notes below. But as cute as these little things are, the reality of the matter is that we are growing these to ultimately be food for my family and I. I know that's tough for some of you to deal with, but that's the truth. That's the reality of the matter. Now, however, even though I'm growing them for that purpose, I strive to give them the best life possible while they are here, to make sure that they live a good life and that we raise them in a sustainable way that's good for them as well as for the environment here on the homestead. So that's the case with these. But also on this other side, in this divider that I have here in this brooder, I have 5 female pekins, and we're raising these in hopes to be able to reproduce more babies from them in the future. Because we have 2 males that we saved from last time when we were raising ducklings. Well, right now they need some new water and feed, so let's get them some. Ducks and ducklings tend to be messier than chicks and chickens. So the ducklings were knocking their pine shavings in their water here. You can see right there, yuck. So I'm thinking now that they're getting a little bigger that I can actually raise this water up off the pine shavings, and then they won't be knocking the pine shavings in their water here. So we'll just have to see. Right on there. Let's see. All right, guys, go ahead and drink some water. Are you going to be camera shy? These tend to be camera shy, so I'm going to get their feed, and hopefully while I'm doing their feed, maybe they'll come out there and get some water. For the first couple weeks of their life, for the pekins as well as when I'm growing broiler chickens, I have them on a starter grower feed, and then we transition them over, usually around 3 or 4 weeks, to a broiler feed specifically for putting more weight and more meat on the birds. And I get my feed from a local feed mill, and you can probably find one in your area. If you can't, you can go to your local ag store and they'll have some blends of these, or maybe you can mix your own. But you definitely want to make sure you have them on the right feed if you're raising them for broilers and if layers, because one of the mistakes that I've made in the past is I accidentally put my layers on a blend for broilers, and I was like, man, why are my chickens getting so big but they're not laying any eggs? And that's why. So, and vice versa, if you want your meat birds to put on weight, you don't want them eating a bunch of layer feed, because they're not going to put on the weight and meat for you. So just something to keep in mind from someone who's learned the hard way. Here's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I still haven't gotten any water yet, but looking at it, I think it's still a little high for them. So I'm going to add this plant tray as a platform for them, so that way they can step up on it and reach the water. I think that should work. Alrighty, so they're not going through their food quite as quickly since it's only 5 of them, and they're huddled on over here. So on this side we're using the heating plate, and then on the other side we're using a heating lamp. And the heating plate uses less power. However, I have found that it doesn't quite radiate heat around the brooder like the heat lamp. The heat lamp just projects more heat. And with the heat plate, they can get under here and be warm, kind of like they would be with being with the mother. That would keep them warm underneath her wings and things like that. But they're not huddled under there now. It's just warming up outside and in here. And I can't say that I recommend one over the other because each has its pros and its cons. For example, the heat lamp, because it generates so much heat, it uses more power, and there's a greater risk of it catching something on fire. Yet with the heating plate, because it doesn't generate as much heat, there is a greater risk of losing some of your birds to the cold, especially if you have your brooder in an area that's not warm and it is exposed to more cold temperatures. You could lose your birds to being too cold, especially if you're raising more chicks or ducklings with it and they're just not able to get warm. You could lose some more. So it's more of a personal preference on which one you want to go with. But right now, I use both. So it's feeding time for them. Let me go ahead and top off their feed. And their water looks pretty good. Got water in it. It's only 5 of them, so they're not going through it fast. And for keeping theirs clean, right now I'm using a paint roller tray, and that works for keeping the debris. It just kind of falls down on here and not so much into their water. However, I do not recommend this water at all. If you can buy another water, buy another water, because it doesn't have any kind of handle on it, and after you fill it up, turn it over and fill it up, there's nothing to grab on. So there's been one time where it's been slick on the outside and I go to put it in for them to drink their water and swoop, slipped right out of my hand and actually had crushed, I think it was a chick before. So I need to get another one so I don't have to use this. But if you have to use one of these, just be really, really careful when you're putting it in. And I recommend using both hands to put it in the area that you're going to put it in. Alright, so that's everything I have to do today for our future duck dinners. Next, it's time to take care of our future chicken dinners. There are some really, really solid reasons on why you should grow your own meat, if you can. For starters, health. It's healthier for us as human beings, it's healthier for the animals, and it's healthier for the environment as a whole. A number of years ago, I watched the movie Food, Inc. And for me, that was my first experience seeing the truth about how our food is raised on conventional farms. And it was alarming to me to see that. And since then, I've seen a number of other documentaries that have exposed our food industry, as well as I've been able to see firsthand, just right down the road from me, there's these large chicken houses that's where most of the chickens are raised, in these large chicken houses. And in these houses they're raised where they never get to go outside. They're never able to have access to the sun, direct access, nor are they able to have the ability to eat fresh grass and bugs and scratch around like they're supposed to. And they're also stacked on top of each other because they pack so many of them in these houses. They're just all in there on top of one another, and oftentimes they're pecking at each other. And many farms will actually, that raise them like that, they'll actually take the beak off the chickens. They'll debeak them so that they're not pecking at each other. And instead of doing all that, why not let them express the natural characteristics that they're designed with and raise them differently? So seeing all that is one of the things that prodded me to want to raise our own meat birds. And another thing is, it's more reliable and sustainable for more people to grow their own meat, opposed to a few large mega farms producing the meat for most people, or one major meat company that distributes the meat to most of our country. And in fact, they get their meat mostly from Canada because the regulations are so restrictive here for small farms. It oppresses them to the point where they can't produce meat for others because of these regulations, and that's just wrong. And having this kind of system where these just few companies control the flow of our food, it's really fragile and really could break any day. That's just the state of the matter. But if more people had the ability to grow and produce, then it would be a lot better place to be in, and you would have a more reliable source of food for you and for your family. And another reason to grow your own meat would be as a business, a profitable business. I talked about the regulations for the meat that we have in our country, and thankfully right now that mostly applies to animals, large animals like your cows and things like that. But for chickens and ducks, that doesn't apply as much right now. So there's a number of farmers who started raising backyard chickens, and they started raising it for themselves and eventually got to the point where they were producing for others and have been able to make it a little successful business out of it. And some have even grown to the point like Polyface Farm, where that is a major produce item that they're able to service to customers. So that's just something to keep in mind. Well, it's time to move these birds. Get them on some fresh grass. We have them here in these chicken tractors, mobile chicken tractors, where they can see the sunlight, have access to the sunlight, as well as the grass and bugs. And we move them each day onto a fresh pad of grass. Last one. Most people, when they raise chickens for meat, they primarily will choose the Cornish cross, which is the white chicken that we're raising right here. And one of the reasons that they choose the Cornish cross is because it's like the best chicken for putting weight and meat on fast. And the benefit of putting the weight on fast means you don't have to put extra money into feeding it before it gets to the weight and maturity for processing. But one of the major drawbacks to raising the Cornish cross is it is not reproducible. It's like a mule chicken. It takes two different breeds to breed together to create the Cornish cross, and then you can't reproduce the Cornish cross just because of the genetics involved there. Which is why we this year are raising a couple different breeds to figure out what I want to do long term to be able to reproduce meat for ourselves on our own. So we're experimenting with the big red broiler, as well as the ginger broiler, the black Jersey giant chicken, as well as a dual purpose breed that we are having a different section right now called the Delaware chicken. It's good for producing eggs and meat. So I really want the ability to be able to reproduce our chickens, so that way we are able to have something that's more sustainable and more self-sufficient here on my homestead. Well, now that they're moved on to fresh grass, now it's time to fill up their water as well as get them some broiler feed. Wow, that was pretty neat to see. That's the first time I've done a time lapse on any of the broilers that I've raised here on the farm. And seeing that makes me think, no wonder why we go through so much feed. Because the Cornish crosses, it looks like all they do is just eat and eat and eat. And then the Black Jersey Giants, it's like, is all they do is just lay around all day long? Come on guys, let's do something. Well, that brings another reason why you should raise your own meat, and I am trying to grow more of my own. It's because it's so rewarding to have that connection to my food and the animals that we raise. I wouldn't have been able to see that if we got our chickens solely from the grocery store. No, but seeing them grow, hands-on, being hands-on with them from start to finish is so rewarding. To see them live their life and work with them on a daily basis, and then at the end present that to my family, and knowing that my hands went to serving them and providing that food for them. That's rewarding. One thing that's really important to making the experience overall enjoyable and more rewarding is to make sure you equip yourself with the right resources. Just starting off with raising chickens, we didn't really have any equipment at all. But over time, we've gradually tried to improve our equipment and our processes to make the experience even better. And I mentioned earlier that I get my birds from Murray McMurray Hatchery. But whether you use Murray McMurray or not, you want to make sure that you're getting your animals from a good source to better ensure that you are getting good quality animals for the purpose or purposes that you are raising them for, whether it be for meat or eggs or both. You want to make sure that they are going to produce the results that you are looking for. And a part of that is also making sure you are providing them with the things that they need. As you're starting off with raising your animals, and especially if you're on a tight budget, you just do what you can, and then as you go, you gradually try to improve and add equipment to help you have a better, more enjoyable experience of raising them. That's what I did. We started off with basically no budget at all, and then we just gradually tried to improve as I went along. And I showed you my brooder earlier, but when you're getting your chicks or your ducklings, you want to make sure that you have a home for them to be in that keeps them warm and safe. And you need to make sure you have some kind of brooder, whether it's one that you buy or whether it's one you construct yourself. You really need a brooder, and you need a heating source. You can choose one of the ones that I showed you earlier as well. We get a lot of our equipment from Strombergs. We get our waterers and our feeders from them. So you want to make sure that you have those items ready to go before you get your animals. You don't want to have to be waiting around. If you can help it, make sure you have those items ready for them. And then as they graduate, the chicken tractors, I constructed those myself. I don't recommend buying any of those. A lot of the chicken coops and things that you can see at your local ag store or whatever, hardware store, I don't really recommend any of those. If you can, construct ones. That's the best way to go. My chicken tractors are designed for the context of where we are here. So Joel Salatin at Polyface Farms, his chicken tractors are a lot bigger than mine, but mine are smaller. I don't need a dolly or a hand truck to move them around with, that I can easily move them myself. And for the tighter areas that they need to go in, we don't have large pastures. Some of you may have larger pastures. So going with Joel Salatin's design, that may be the fit for you, or you may decide you want to do something else. You have to figure that out. And as you're gaining the experience, you kind of figure out what you like to do and what you don't like to do. And within those chicken tractors, I have waterers and feeders once again that we use, and these are a little bigger than the ones that are in the brooder just because they're more suitable for being outdoors, especially as the warmer months are here and they're going to be drinking more water, especially those Cornish crosses who like to eat and drink. So we have a bigger waterers and feeders for them. And then as they grow and mature and then get to the time where it's time to process them and we move them from the chicken tractor, I use these crates from Strombergs that I really like. We put them in the crates and then move them on over, and the stress is so much lower for them here, just moving them just a few feet from where they were living in the chicken tractor to over to the processing area over here is so much better than seeing the chickens and turkeys that I see on the highways in these trucks where they all just crammed in and they're going who knows how far, and it's just, that just looks stressful to me watching them that way. But transporting them right over here is really a low-key thing, and then getting ready to prep them and dispatch them. We use keel cones, which we also get from Strombergs, and then from there we move them into the scalding pot, which really something we improved on here recently. We got a Cajun rocket pot that I saw being used and actually had the opportunity to use at Comfort Farms, and it helps out a lot with keeping your water at the temperature that you really want it to be. One of the times that we were processing here on our homestead before, we were off schedule because it took so long to warm the water up in our scalding pot, but the Cajun rocket pot is so much hotter, and definitely recommend using that, and I'll leave that information down in the show notes below too. But another thing that is really helpful, trust me, I know, because when our first time that we processed chickens, man, we had them strung up on the clothesline, and then we had to pull the feathers off by hand, and man, that takes a long time. But having this thing right here, this plucker, makes a world of difference and makes the experience so much more enjoyable and so much faster to get the job done. And then from there we move them on to the processing table, and you can get just a simple old folding table, whatever works for you. You need to have an area where you're doing the evisceration and all that, and speaking of that, want to make sure you have the right knives and things like that to cut them up, because all that stuff makes a world of difference too. And another thing that it's just a personal preference that I like is that there's these grill gloves that are water resistant and heat tolerant that I use to grab the chickens out of the scalding water. That helps out as well, so you're not burning yourself as you're putting your hand in the pot. I just like it so much better. So those are a number of things that can help you with raising your own meat, and things as we have come along and had experience with raising meat here that we've been adding to our systems to make the overall experience much more enjoyable. So I provided you with some reasons why you should grow your own meat, especially chickens and ducks, which are some of the easiest ones to start off with. We've been doing it, and we're planning to do more, but with other animals, but right now we're starting with that and really trying to hone in on our processes here. But that just gives you an idea of why you should. I've also provided you with some how-to things in there as well as a list of resources that can help you in making the experience much more enjoyable. So make sure you check out the links in the show notes below to provide you with a list of resources to help you to make that experience much more enjoyable. See you next time.